The historical struggle against central banking and usury. Quotes from important people in the world, past and present. The most hated sort of money-making, and with the greatest reason, is usury, which makes a gain out of money itself, and not from the natural use of it. For money was intended to be used in exchange, but not to increase at interest. And this term usury, which means the birth of money from money, is applied to the breeding of money, because the offspring resembles the parent. Wherefore, of all modes of making money, this is the most unnatural. The modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. The process is perhaps the most astounding piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. Banking was conceived in iniquity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create deposits. And with the flick of a pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it back again. The bank, its property and assets, and all deposits and other funds entrusted to it, shall be immune in time of peace and in time of war from any measure such as expropriation, requisition, seizure, confiscation, prohibition or restriction of gold or currency export or import, and any other measure. Article 10, Instrument of Foundation, Bank of International Settlements. When the world around the IMF goes downhill, we thrive. We become extremely active because we lend money. We earn interest and charges and all the rest of it, and the institution does well. When the world goes well and we've had years of growth, as was the case back in 2006 and 2007, the IMF doesn't do so well both financially and otherwise. I know many people have a great deal of difficulty comprehending just how many wars are started for no other purpose than to force private central banks onto nations. So let me share a few examples, so that you understand why the US government is mired in so many wars against so many foreign nations. There is ample precedent for this. The United States fought the American Revolution primarily over King George III's Currency Act, which forced the colonists to conduct their business only using printed banknotes borrowed from the Bank of England at interest. Benjamin Franklin, acting as the colony's representative to Britain, argued against this move in 1763. You see, a legitimate government can both spend and lend money into circulation, while banks can only lend significant amounts of their promissory banknotes, for they can neither give away nor spend but a tiny fraction of the money the people need. Thus, when your bankers here in England place money in circulation, there is always a debt principal to be returned and usury to be paid. The result is that you have always too little credit in circulation to give the workers full employment. In the colonies, we issue our own money. It is called colonial scrip. We issue it in proper proportion to make the products pass easily from the producers to the consumers. The following year, King George III passed the Currency Act, which outlawed all forms of money in the colonies, forcing them to conduct all commerce using banknotes borrowed at interest from the Bank of England. The bank hath benefit of interest on all monies which it creates out of nothing. The bank hath benefit of interest on all monies which it creates out of nothing. The bank hath benefit of interest on all monies which it creates out of nothing. After the Revolution, the new United States adopted a radically different economic system in which the government issued its own value-based money, so that private banks like the Bank of England were not siphoning off the wealth of the people through interest-bearing banknotes. The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system, which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators, was probably the prime cause of the Revolution. The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system, which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators, was probably the prime cause of the Revolution. The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system, which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators, was probably the prime cause of the Revolution. Following the Revolution, the US government actually took steps to keep the bankers out of the new government. Any person holding any office or any stock in any institution in the nature of a bank for issuing or discounting bills or notes payable to bearer or order cannot be a member of the House whilst he holds such office or stock. Third Congress of the United States Senate, 23rd of December, 1793, signed by the President, George Washington. If ever again our nation stumbles upon unfunded paper, it shall surely be like death to our body politic. This country will crash. George Washington. All the perplexities, confusion, and distresses in America arise not from defects in the Constitution or Confederation, nor from want of honor or virtue, as much from downright ignorance of the nature of coin, credit, and circulation. John Adams, Letter to Thomas Jefferson. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation, Then by deflation, the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people, to whom it properly belongs. Paper is poverty. It is the ghost of money and not money itself. Thomas Jefferson. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. Of all the contrivances for cheating the laboring classes of mankind, none has been more effective than that which deludes them with paper money. We are in danger of being overwhelmed with irredeemable paper, mere paper, representing not gold nor silver. No, sir, representing nothing but broken promises, bad faith, bankrupt corporations, cheated creditors, and a ruined people. Capital must protect itself in every possible way, both by combination and legislation. Debts must be collected, mortgages foreclosed as rapidly as possible. When, through process of law, the common people lose their homes, they will become more docile and more easily governed through the strong arm of the government applied by a central power of wealth under leading financiers. These truths are well known among our principal men, who are now engaged in forming an imperialism to govern the world. By dividing the voter through the political party system, we can get them to expend their energies in fighting for questions of no importance. But bankers are nothing if not dedicated to their schemes to acquire your wealth, and know full well how easy it is to corrupt a nation's leaders. Meyer Amschel Rothschild. When a government is dependent upon bankers for money, they and not the leaders of the government control the situation, since the hand that gives is above the hand that takes. Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is gain. Napoleon Bonaparte. Just 1 year after Mayer Amschel Rothschild had uttered his infamous, "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws," the bankers succeeded in setting up a new private central bank called the First Bank of the United States, largely through the efforts of the Rothschilds' chief U.S. supporter, Alexander Hamilton. Founded in 1791, by the end of its 20-year charter, the First Bank of the United States had almost ruined the nation's economy, while enriching the bankers. Congress refused to renew the charter and signaled their intention to go back to a state-issued value-based currency on which the people paid no interest at all to any banker. This resulted in a threat from Nathan Mayer Rothschild against the U.S. government. Either the application for renewal of the charter is granted, or the United States will find itself involved in a most disastrous war. Congress still refused to renew the charter for the First Bank of the United States, whereupon Nathan Mayer Rothschild railed, "Teach those impudent Americans a lesson. Bring them back to colonial status." The British Prime Minister at the time, Spencer Perceval, was adamantly opposed to war with the United States, primarily because the majority of England's military might was occupied with the ongoing Napoleonic Wars. Spencer Perceval was concerned that Britain might not prevail in a new American war, a concern shared by many in the British government. Then, Spencer Perceval was assassinated, the only British Prime Minister to be assassinated in office, and replaced by Robert Banks Jenkinson, the second Earl of Liverpool, who was fully supportive of a war to recapture the colonies. "If my sons did not want wars, there would be none." Guttl Schnaper, wife of Mayer Amschel Rothschild and mother of his 5 sons. "If my sons did not want wars, there would be none." Guttl Schnaper, wife of Mayer Amschel Rothschild and mother of his 5 sons. "If my sons did not want wars, there would be none." Guttl Schnaper, wife of Mayer Amschel Rothschild and mother of his 5 sons. Financed at virtually no interest by the Rothschild-controlled Bank of England, Britain then provoked the War of 1812 to recolonize the United States and force them back into the slavery of the Bank of England, or to plunge the United States into so much debt they would be forced to accept a new private central bank. And the plan worked. Even though the War of 1812 was won by the United States, Congress was forced to grant a new charter for yet another private bank issuing the public currency as loans at interest, the Second Bank of the United States. Once again, private bankers were in control of the nation's money supply and cared not who made the laws or how many British and American soldiers had to die for it. Once again, the nation was plunged into debt, unemployment, and poverty by the predations of the private central bank, and in 1832, Andrew Jackson successfully campaigned for his second term as president under the slogan, "Jackson and no bank." True to his word, Jackson succeeded in blocking the renewal of the charter for the Second Bank of the United States. Gentlemen, I too have been a close observer of the doings of the Bank of the United States. You are a den of vipers and thieves. I have determined to rout you out, and by the Eternal, bringing his fist down on the table, I will rout you out. That may be true, gentlemen, but that is your sin. Should I let you go on, you will ruin 50,000 families, and that would be my sin. Shortly after President Jackson, the only American president to actually pay off the national debt, ended the Second Bank of the United States, there was an attempted assassination which failed when both pistols used by the assassin, Richard Lawrence, failed to fire. Lawrence later said that with Jackson dead, money would be more plenty. Following the loss of its charter, the Second Bank of the United States tried to operate as a normal bank, but failed after just 5 years. President Zachary Taylor opposed the creation of a new private central bank, owing to the historical abuses of the First and Second Banks of the United States. The idea of a national bank is dead and will not be revived in my time. Taylor died on July 9, 1850, after eating a bowl of cherries and milk rumored to have been poisoned. The symptoms he displayed are consistent with acute arsenic poisoning. President James Buchanan also opposed a private central bank. During the Panic of 1857, he attempted to set limits on banks issuing more loans than they had actual funds, and to require all issued banknotes to be backed by federal government assets. He was poisoned with arsenic and survived, although 38 other people at the dinner died. The public school system is as subservient to the bankers' wishes to keep certain history from you, just as the corporate media is subservient to Monsanto's wishes to keep the dangers of GMOs from you, and the global warming cult's wishes to conceal from you that the Earth has actually been cooling for the last 16 years. Thus, it should come as little surprise that much of the real reasons for the events of the Civil War are not well known to the average American. The few who understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or be so dependent upon its favors that there will be no opposition from that class, while on the other hand, the great body of people, mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantage that capital derives from the system, will bear its burdens without complaint, and perhaps without even suspecting that the system is inimical to their interests. The Rothschild brothers of London writing to associates in New York, 1863. When the Confederacy seceded from the United States, the bankers once again saw the opportunity for a rich harvest of debt and offered to fund Lincoln's efforts to bring the South back into the Union, but at 30% interest. Lincoln remarked that he would not free the black man by enslaving the white man to the bankers and using his authority as president, issued a new government currency, the greenback. This was a direct threat to the wealth and power of the central bankers, who quickly responded.